Now, before we start our lesson, I ran into this story that relates to the lesson itself. And the story is entitled Nails in the Fence. There was once this young boy who had a bad temper, and his father gave him a bag of nails, told him every time that he lost his temper, he must go out, hammer a nail in the back of a fence. And the first day that he was out there, the boy hammered 37 nails into the fence. Over the next few weeks, he learned to little by little control his anger. And the times that he nailed nails into that fence line started to dwindle, until he discovered that he was able to easily hold his temper, and that driving those nails into the fence was not something he wanted to do, nor did he think was wise. Finally, the day came where the boy didn't lose his temper at all. And therefore, he told his dad, and his father said, okay, what I want you to do now is I want you to go out, and every day that you do not lose your temper, I want you to pull out one of those nails. To which that's exactly what the young boy did. Days passed, and the young boy was able to finally tell his father that all the nails that he had put into that fence, he had taken away. And the father took him by the hand, led him to the fence line, and said, "You have done a great job." But he also said, "I want you to look at the holes in the fence. See, the fence will never be the same. When you say things in anger, they leave a scar just like this one. And you can put a knife into a man and draw it out, and it won't matter how many times you say, 'I'm sorry.' The wound is still there." Are we like this boy sometimes? Do we allow our anger to go unchecked, failing to see the damage that it can cause? The title of today's lesson is Overcoming Anger. Now, before I start this lesson, I want to go ahead and just ensure that everyone knows the reasoning for this lesson. I was asked by a brother, and the brother here is not here this morning, but he asked me to go ahead and speak on this topic, on the topic of both resentment and anger, which I felt was something that we definitely need to talk about. And I say this only purely so that there's no speculation, no thoughts in any way, shape, or form that this lesson is being given on behalf of someone, or I'm aiming this at something or any particular event or any notion in that sense. This is purely because someone has asked me to do this. Now, additionally, I want to go ahead and let you know that this lesson borrows much of its content from a lesson that I heard back a while back by Don Blackwell. And I felt it was done so well that I wanted to go ahead and look at that lesson as well. And if you wish to hear the original lesson itself, you can go ahead and find that on the World Video Bible School. And it is entitled Temper. It's a very good thing, and I think you would be blessed to hear that lesson in its originality. Okay, so in James chapter 1, verse 19, James tells us that we must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Meaning there is something that we can instantly take from here. That anger in and of itself is not sinful. You see, we're told to be slow to anger, not that we are not to have any anger. As a matter of fact, we can see multiple times where not only Christ, but also God is referred to as having anger or wrath. In Mark chapter 3, verse 5, we see Jesus is angered because of the hardness of the Pharisees' hearts. As he goes ahead and he is about to heal a man from his hand, and he's going to do this on the Sabbath. And he asks, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? To which none of them want to answer. And Jesus looks around, and we're told that he looks at them with anger. In John chapter 2, verse 13 through 17, Jesus is angered by the fact that there are those within the temple that are using the temple as a common place of business. And he drives out the money changers with a cord, and he flips tables. He shows his anger visibly, and we see his zeal at that moment. In Hebrews chapter 3, verse 17, we're told that God's anger is and was with the Israelites for the 40 years that they wandered in the wilderness because of their sinful acts. In Romans chapter 5, verse 9, we're told that Paul says that those who are justified by the blood of Christ are saved from the wrath of God, showing again God's anger. So if this is the case, then we know that God cannot be joined to sin, and Christ was not a sinner, he was sinless. Then we must conclude that anger and even certain actions that are taken with anger are not sinful. Now that said, I want you to look back at James chapter 1, verse 20. Because James continues on to say that the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. In other words, anger in and of itself is not sinful, but it is dangerous. See, this is exactly what we read in Ephesians. In Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26, which was read for us by Brother Johnny, the verse starts off and it says, be angry. In other words, you have that emotion. But it also continues on and says, yet do not sin. And do not let the sun go down on your anger, and do not give the devil an opportunity. From the very beginning, we can look to the scriptures and we can see from the very first couple of chapters that anger is a very dangerous emotion. In Genesis chapter 4, verse 5 through 8, here we're told about Cain and Abel. And Cain and Abel are sacrificing to the Lord, and the Lord regards Abel's sacrifice as well. And we're told in verse 5 that he has no regard for Cain's sacrifice. And this causes Cain then to become, as we're told, very angry, and that his countenance falls. Now, we know the end of the story. Cain ends up killing his brother. Now, the question is, did Cain have any ability to go ahead and overcome his anger? Was he unable to stop the events that took place? And the answer is, he absolutely had the ability to stop it. In Genesis chapter 4, verses 6 through 7, as a matter of fact, we're told about the counseling that is given by God to Cain. He is told, if you do well, will not your countenance go ahead and be lifted up? And then he says, you need to master your emotions. If you master your emotions, you will forego sinning, because sin is crouching at the doorstep. And Cain does not take this counsel. So then when we look at anger, we must understand anger is dangerous. But, many of us would look at that and say, well, look, I understand anger is dangerous, but I am not going to go ahead and murder someone now. I mean, yes, I become angry. I let it fly sometimes, but that doesn't mean I'm going to go murder anybody. Well, I want you to look at what Christ says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 21 to 22. Because Matthew chapter 5, verse 21 to 22, Christ goes ahead and says, you have heard it from the ancient, we're told, you shall not commit murder, and whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court, and whoever says to his brother, you good for nothing, shall be guilty before the Supreme Court, and whoever says you fool shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery hell. Jesus, while giving this Sermon on the Mount, gives us a very stern warning about anger, as he equates the physical murder to the anger that we might have in our hearts towards our brethren. And he goes ahead and he says essentially that when we house that type of anger, that it can lead us even to hell. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty strong. And it tells us that we cannot be dismissive about anger. But let's look at another example of anger. Because here we see Cain and Abel, and we can look and we might even dismiss what has happened, just as Cain was an evil person. But let's look at a different example. An example of one who probably we will look at as a man of courage, a man of strength, a man of faith, and yet because he let his anger fly, he suffered dearly for it. Look with me in the Numbers. Numbers chapter 20, verses 1 through 5. In Numbers chapter 20, verses 1 through 5, here we are told the story about the Israelites. The Israelites are now wandering in the wilderness for the 40 years. And they have been punished by God because of their lack of faith in God. And we're told in verse 1, then the sons of Israel, the whole congregation came to the wilderness of Zin in the first month. And the people stayed at Kadesh. Now Miriam died and was buried there. There was no water for the congregation, and they assembled themselves against Moses and Aaron. The people then contended with Moses and spoke, saying, if we had perished when our brothers perished before the Lord, why have you brought us to the Lord's assembly into this wilderness for us and our beasts to die here? Why have you have made us come up from Egypt to bring us into this wretched place? It is not a place of grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, nor is there any water to drink. Now it's important that we kind of take a step back here. Because the very first thing we're told in verse 1 is that Miriam, Moses' sister, has just passed away. Can you imagine the grief that Moses is feeling at this moment as he has lost his sister? And now, to pile on top of that, the people of Israel come together and they start blaming Moses and Aaron for the fact that there's no water there. They go ahead and in verse 3 they said it would be better for us if we had died with the people before us. In verse 4 they say that you, not God, has led us there, not our sin has brought us here, but you have led us into this wilderness so that we and our animals can die. And then in verse 5 they say that you promised a lot. You promised us a place of milk and honey, and here we are in this desolate place. You've lied to us. Now, is it understandable that Moses was angry? I would say any one of us would be angry. As he faced the loss of his sister, as he is bombarded with all of these anger and complaints from these people, and this isn't the first time, because in chapter 14 we're told that these people had been grumbling over and over and over and over again, and always it was aimed at Moses and Aaron. But when we look at this, it isn't that there's anger, it's what was done with that anger. Henry Beecher, a prominent Congregationalist and clergyman, a speaker in the mid to late 19th century, wrote this. He said, a man who does not know how to be angry does not know how to be good. A man that does not know how to be shaken to his heart's core with indignation over evil things is either a fungus or a wicked man. What is he saying here? He's saying that there are times that we have justification to be mad. We have understandable justification to be angry at a situation. In Psalm chapter 97, verse 10, the psalmist writes, hate evil, you who love the Lord. Now that's pretty strong words. And here we understand that we should, as Christians, hate evil. And it shouldn't be something that we could shy away from to say, I am angry at the things that are happening in our society. We should understand that it is all right to look at society, and when we see the devastating effects of sin in society, we should be angry at that. That we should be angry when we notice and see the countless abortions and the countless lives that are lost of innocence. That should make us angry. We should be angered by the fact that our family units are being attacked daily. That should make us angry. Or the fact that the Lord's Word is looked at as trash in this society. And that people continue to say and harp things about the Lord all the time. That should make us angry. But what do we do with that anger? Does that then justify us to sin? And the answer is no. So what are the restrictions? You see, Moses was given restrictions on his anger. Look with me again in Numbers chapter 20, verse 6. In Numbers chapter 20, verse 6, here Moses is, after just being bombarded with all these complaints, we're told, then Moses and Aaron came forth from the presence of the assembly to the doorway of the tent of meetings and fell on their faces. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to them. And the Lord spoke to Moses, the waters of Meribah, take the rod, you and your brother Aaron, assemble the congregation and speak to the rock before their eyes, that it may yield water. Thus, you shall thus bring forth water from them, for them, out of the rock, and let the congregation and their beasts drink. So Moses took the rod from before the Lord, just as he had commanded. Again, Moses justified to be angry? I would say each and every one of us would probably be angry. And yet notice the restrictions that are being placed on Moses at this time. God tells Moses that he is to give the people a calm and deliberate and specific response to their complaints. But Moses didn't do that. That is not what Moses did. Moses allowed his anger to get the best of him at that point. But why? Well, it's kind of easy to understand. In 1 Samuel chapter 25, 1 Samuel chapter 25, verse 13, we're told about the story of David and Nabal. How David goes ahead, he is the anointed king, he's on the run from Saul, and here Nabal has shearers out there, and David is protecting Nabal's shearers. And so David needs provision for him and his men, and he requests from Nabal that he provide some of those provisions for him and his men. And Nabal disrespects David completely. Tells him, I don't know who this person is, even though he's the anointed king. And why should I give anything to this man, even though he has been protecting his men? And how does David respond to this? David is angered. So much so that we're told that he takes 400 men and he is going to wipe out everybody from Nabal's household. Is David have justification for being angered at this moment? Absolutely. But look at how he responds to Abigail after she goes ahead and intercedes on behalf of Nabal. In verse 32 to 34, we're told in chapter 25, then David said to Abigail, blessed be the Lord God of Israel who sent you this day to meet me. And blessed be your discernment. And blessed be you who have kept me from this day, from bloodshed and from avenging myself by my own hands. David says, if it wasn't for you, I would have gone and wiped out everybody in Nabal's household. I would have destroyed them all. I would have taken vengeance. I would have had shed blood. See, David equates Abigail's actions here to God's providence, to God's prevention of him doing something that was going to be wrong, of him allowing his anger to get the best of him. And this is no different for us. You know, we're told in this author, Bodhi Thoen, she writes this. She says, anger is the wind which blows out the lamp of the mind. I want you to think about that. Anger is the wind that blows the lamp of the mind. What is she saying? She's saying when we get angry, we lose all common sense. We just forget about everything. And sometimes we look at that and we say, then anger must be a bad thing. But the truth is, anger is a natural emotion that has been given to us by God. As a matter of fact, we're told according to the Amen Clinic article that I read, it says this. I want to quote this. It says, our primal fight response stems from anger. Anger motivates us to be vigilant or to vigilantly detect threats and sharpen our focus. When our safety is at risk, we are attacked, our anger automatically activates and drives us to defend ourselves, sometimes quickly and forcefully. Anger essentially alerts us when someone or something wants to hurt us and provides aggression needed to overcome the stronger attack. In other words, anger promotes this fight or flight kind of syndrome. It allows us to become stronger. It allows us to go ahead and take on the challenge that is before us. So when we look at this, we understand that anger is an emotion just like love, just like care, just like any other emotion that we have. The problem is that when we allow anger to overcome all our common sense, it can lead us to devastating effects. You see, just as anger benefits us in preparing for us to be able to fight or flight, the one thing that anger also does is it prevents us from thinking through problems. Because you have that burst of adrenaline that comes in and it dramatically affects how we think. As a matter of fact, this is not something that is brand new. The proverb writer writes in Proverbs 15 verse 18, a hot-tempered man stirs up strife, but the slow to anger calms a dispute. Which one are we, brethren? Are we the one who stirs up strife when things get bad, when problems arise? Are we unable to control our temper? Are we slow to anger? Are we a source of calm for those around us? Are we able to help someone or be able to feel that calm when somebody comes near us? Again, anger is not wrong, but the proverb writer also writes in 16 verse 32, he who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who captures a city. In other words, here Solomon is saying that when we rule our spirit, when we control, when we have self-control, we are ruling our spirits. And it makes us mightier than the strongest man. So what was Moses supposed to do with his anger? What was he supposed to do? He was supposed to follow the instructions that were given to him by God. So what are the results of anger? What are the things that we can see that anger brings about? Look with me in Numbers chapter 20, verses 10 through 12. Here we're told, and Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly before the rock. And he said to them, listen now, you rebels, shall we bring forth water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and the water came forth abundantly, and the congregation and their beasts drank. Here we're told God gave Moses a specific instruction. The first instruction he told him was to go and speak to the rock. Who did Moses speak to? In his anger, Moses doesn't speak to the rock, Moses speaks to the people. He goes ahead and he instantly starts calling them names. Listen, you rebels. He begins to insult them. Secondly, he goes ahead and he says, shall we bring forth water for you out of this rock? In his moment of anger, Moses dismisses the honor and glory that is rightfully the Lord's. And he goes ahead and fails to acknowledge what God's power is doing, not Moses's. Instead, Moses makes it about himself and about Aaron, saying, shall we? Then Moses follows this up with hitting the rock, not once but twice, showing his anger at this moment. And how does it result? What is the outcome of this anger? We're told 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, longing for the promised land. And in a moment, Moses' rage causes him to lose that opportunity completely. And Moses is upset. Moses asks the Lord to take away this stiff penalty. In Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 25 to 27, we read that Moses repeatedly asks and requests God to enter the promised land, to which God refuses for Moses, and tells him essentially to stop asking and that he will allow him to see the promised land, but no more. You see, for that moment of loss of temper, it cost Moses dearly. But the question is, what about us? What does our anger cost us? Well, sometimes our anger can cause us to lead to damaged relationships. The proverb writer writes in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 19, "A brother offended is harder to be won than a stronger city, and contentions are like the bars of a citadel." What he is saying is, when we anger, when we offend someone, it is hard to overcome those things. It's hard to break through that. Why? Because it's hurtful. Because when we are hurt, when we are slighted, when we are angered by someone who wrongs us, it is hard to get over that. It is hard to overlook that. And many, because of 10 seconds of anger, have found themselves losing friendships, destroying marriages, destroying families, because they were not able to control their anger. But what about a church? You see, sometimes it is not just about us. I would say it's honestly more so not about us. Because we must remember that we represent more than just us. See, we wear a title. We wear a name that is above us. We wear the name of Christ. We wear the name of Christians. And so when a Christian goes ahead and flies off the handle and curses or disrespects someone or contradicts the things of the Lord in an ungodly manner because of anger, then those who look upon this Christian instantly get that Christianity is all about that. And we hear things then where they say there's just hypocrites inside the church. If that's Christianity, I want no part of it. You see, we end up destroying and hurting the things of the Lord, the message that the Lord has given to us. If in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 18, Solomon says, "Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good." We can do a lot of harm to the church, to the message, to the Lord's gospel by simply not controlling ourselves. But also, we can hurt ourselves. You see, we can also hurt our ability to teach others, to go ahead and influence others. In Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 9, Solomon writes, "Patience of spirit is better than haughtiness of spirit. Do not be eager in your heart to be angry, for anger resides in the bosom of fools." How are we viewed outside of these walls? Are we viewed as wise people, or are we viewed as fools that allow our anger to go ahead and just overtake us at all moments of life? So we understand that anger is bad, that it can be bad. Well, what are the remedies for it? Well, in these last few minutes, I'm going to go ahead and give you very quickly some remedies for this. Look with me back at Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26. Here, our scripture reading that was read for us tells us, Paul gives us a perfect summation of the remedies for our anger. The first thing he says is, be angry and do not sin. We need to know when we're angry. We need to understand what are the triggers to our anger. And we need then not to lose our focus. We have to understand that Moses, when he went ahead and did what he did, what were the two infractions that the Lord said that Moses had committed? The first thing he said is that you have failed to believe in me. In other words, you have failed to trust in me. You have failed to go ahead and be faithful to my word. And second, he says that you have failed to keep me as holy in the eyes of the Israelites. You have failed to sanctify me in their eyes. Brethren, when we allow ourselves to go ahead and fly off the handle and not control our anger, we, one, fail then to believe in the words that the Lord has given to us. Because the Lord has told us that anger can cause huge devastation. But also, we need to understand that we need to believe the fact that if Moses, who is referred to in the scriptures as one of the most humble men on the face of the earth, if it can happen to Moses, it can happen to me. So I need to guard against it. I need to prevent it. But I need to also sanctify the Lord. I need to understand it isn't about me. It's about Christ. It's about the Lord. In 1 Peter chapter 3, we're told in verse 15 through 17 that we are to sanctify Christ as Lord in our hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks. And in verse 16, we're told to keep a good conscience, even when we're slandered. But look at verse 17. He says, "For it is better if God should will it so that you suffer for doing what is right than for doing what is wrong." In verse 17, we're told that we show reverence to the Lord by being willing to suffer even when we're doing what's right. Even when we are in the right. Now, I don't know about you, but when I do something that is correct and I am bombarded with complaints and anger, it causes me to get angry. But here we're told to keep a good conscience and to allow ourselves at times to be slandered and reviled for our good behavior because it glorifies the Lord. Now, that is not simple. That is not easy. For neither me nor you, I guarantee, is not easy. But it is what the scriptures teach. But also we need to consider a few different things. See, we're told in Ephesians chapter 4, the second portion of verse 26, "Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and do not give the devil an opportunity." We first have to consider that I have a choice. I make a decision, and I have the choice to either sin or not sin. The devil doesn't make me do anything. But also, I need to consider God's word. We're told in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 20 to 22, that there is not a righteous man on the earth who continually does good. We will all make mistakes. We will all do things that we just didn't mean. And look at what it also says in that second portion. It says, "Also do not take seriously all the words that are spoken, so that you will not hear the servant cursing you, for you have also realized that you likewise have many times cursed others." What Solomon is saying here is, we can't be so thin-skinned. That sometimes people say things that they do not mean, but they said it and it hurts, and we have to sometimes dismiss it. Because the simple truth is, we have done it ourselves. We have all done it ourselves. But then we also have to consider the devil's kind of angle in this whole thing. You see, we need to understand that the devil is always trying to gain a foothold in our hearts. He is always seeking a way to hurt us. He is always seeking a way to cause us to sin. Not that he causes us to sin, but he gives us temptations so that we may be led into sin. Which is why the devil is described as both an adversary as well as a prowling lion. So we need to do everything in our power to prevent the devil from gaining an opportunity in our hearts. But also, how do we do this? By controlling our tongues. By going ahead and watching what we say. In Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29, we're told, "Let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word that is good for edification according to the need of the moment, so that we will give grace to those who hear us." You see, we need to understand that sometimes we don't have to speak. It's all right. Sometimes when we speak, we have to guard our tongues. We need to watch what we say. Because just as someone can hurt me with their words, I can hurt someone with my words. The simple truth is, I can either diffuse a situation by the things that I say, or I can add fuel to that fire. And I can devastate an entire relationship, I can devastate a church, and I can devastate my own influence upon the church. and upon others. But next, we also have to let it go. You know, sometimes things don't work out in the way that we think it should work out. And here Paul tells us in verse 31, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you along with all malice. We shouldn't allow ourselves to stew in our anger. Hold on to the resentment. Keep that all bottled up so that when that perfect time comes, we can offload on that person. That's not what we're told to do. What we're told to do in Psalm 37 verse 8 is to cease from anger and forsake wrath. Do not fret, it leads to only evil doings. But finally, brethren, the last thing is that we need to show love and forgive. In verse 32 of Ephesians 4, we're told, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ has also forgiven you. We are to forgive others. You see, in the end, the conflict, whatever it may be, may not be resolved. It may not be resolved to my satisfaction. But in the end, I'm going to have a choice. Am I going to have more love for my brother? Or am I going to have more love for me? Am I going to be willing to let it go and forgive, even when I think I'm in the right? Sometimes, brethren, we have a problem with that. But when we look at what love truly is, how it's defined for us in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, it's hard to get around it. It's hard to understand how we can see it in any other way when it tells us that love is not provoked, it does not take wrong into account, all the wrong suffered, it does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but it rejoices in truth and bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Do we endure all things for one another? Do we love each other this way? See, this is the type of love we're called to have for one another. And I want you to also understand that second portion of Ephesians. The standard of forgiveness is not me. The standard is God. See, we are to forgive the way that God forgave us in Christ. And when we were let go of our sin, when Christ came to this earth and died for our sins, were we perfect? No, we were far from it. Romans chapter 5 verse 10 tells us that forgiveness was afforded to us not when we were right with God, but when we were still enemies of God. So the question then is, am I willing to be wrong for the sake of peace? Am I willing to go as far as it depends on me? Am I willing to let it go and forgive my brother or sister in Christ? But it's not just my brother or sister in Christ. Romans chapter 12, the last portion, tells us we are to love our enemies and to go ahead and do good by them as well. You see, that's what, as difficult as it is, as hard as it is, that is what we're called to be. This is what we're called to change to. So today we've taken some time to look at the subject of overcoming anger. And we've seen, I pray that I have helped you to see, and that it is beneficial to see that anger in itself is not wrong, it is not sinful, but what we do with that anger can definitely be sinful. And just as Paul has given to us, we need to understand that I need to know when I get angry. I need to not lose my focus. I need to consider that I have a choice and that God's Word has given me the reason and the ways to do what I'm supposed to. And then what the devil's desire is for me. And then I need to control my tongue, let it go, and also show love and forgiveness to those brothers and sisters in Christ and even to my enemies. So the question that I want to leave you with this morning is, how have you been dealing with your anger? If you're one who has not accepted Christ, we just talked about how Christ, through the blood of Christ, we are spared from the wrath, the anger of God. But you have to be in the blood of Christ. If you're one who has not accepted the gospel call, you have the opportunity to do so today. take that opportunity. Don't lose that moment. But if you're one who has already accepted Christ and has come to Christ, but looks at your life and notices, you know what, I have not been practicing the self-control that I'm supposed to be, and I need to change that, take the opportunity to change today. If there's any way that we can help you, if there's any way that we can do, anything that we can do for you, please let us know as we stand and sing the song of encouragement.